goes on. And when violations are found and reported, they're often rarely followed through on. You can see violations, I guess penalties for violations have been decreasing, despite the major increase in drilling that's been happening over the past couple of years. Penalties are also pretty weak. I know if you look at the revised code, it sort of varies. There's sort of a list of different penalties for different violations, but for the most part, I mean, most of the fees we're talking about for violations, whether it be spill, water contamination, are capped at about $10,000, in some cases $20,000, which of course comes nowhere near the sort of damage that can be caused by some of these problems. Another example is very close to home, obviously, of lax enforcement. The dumping that happened in Youngstown very recently. One of the really eye-opening aspects of this is that this gentleman, this company, has a real history of doing these sorts of things. Goes back at least until through the 80s, I think, into the 70s too. At least 50 citations, violations, well suspensions, and yet, the Ohio administration has continued to essentially look the other way and grant permits. A clear example of failure to really enforce and keep a close eye on what's happening in Ohio. Water quality testing and monitoring requirements legally in Ohio are really minimal. There were a couple requirements added recently in law, but it really doesn't amount to what we really need. Testing should be happening before drilling, during drilling, and after. This is just a requirement for before, and it's limited to a relatively small amount of area if there's a water well within a new horizontal well. So it's very limited. Here's a new case that came out very recently from Monroe Falls. Sort of a mixed bag, but some really good silver linings. It was struck down in a municipal zoning ordinance, which really is not a surprise given the statute that we have to work with in some prior case law too. But some good things that came out of it. This court, and this has not yet gone to the Ohio Supreme Court. My understanding is that it will be appealed, and we'll see what happens. But this appellate court endorsed an earlier Ohio Supreme Court that was not looking in the fracking context. This was in the late 80s. It was looking in the hazardous waste context, but it was dealing with a preemption statute that was essentially identical to the fracking one we're dealing with. And that court had a very interesting holding. It essentially said, maybe you can't zone, maybe you can't, require a permit, that sort of thing, but you can require a substantial amount of fees from this company that then you can use to set up sort of a monitoring system, to monitor documents, to monitoring what sort of waste is coming in and out. So I think that establishes a really helpful precedent for communities that want to set up some sort of impact fee structure and conduct their own monitoring. This court also endorsed, I think, an earlier case that allowed a city to require information reporting for spills, leakages. In this case, it was an air leak of some sort. It did uphold right-of-way permits, basically, according to this court, because cities still retain, and townships and counties still retain some control over their local roads. You can, as a city or a political subdivision, require a permit prior to drilling if the drilling is going to go underneath your street. So that's pretty interesting. The court also endorsed the notion that cities, at least cities, can require public hearings of these companies. Now, unfortunately, you can't precondition a permit or drilling on the hearing, so you might not be able to actually stop the drilling, but you can at the very least bring the company in to be, held to the court of public opinion put on record. So that's helpful. And very quickly, I'll wrap up with a little bit on Ohio's public lands. 2011, another unfortunate move by the State General Assembly. It's opened state parks to oil and gas drilling for the first time in their history. It also essentially stripped all these state agencies and universities, state colleges, of their former authority to decide whether or not they want drilling on their lands, and essentially put all of that decision-making authority into a central leasing body. That body, fortunately, has not been put together yet. I think the state's been dragging its feet for various reasons. So fortunately, not a lot of drilling has been new drilling has been happening on state lands, but when that gears up, we may be seeing quite a bit of nominations and potential drilling going forward. And one little aspect of this that is positive is that there is a public comment period, so there is time for a little delay and get one's voice out there and raise public awareness about specific parks or other lands by the state that might be in jeopardy. And I'll leave you with this. Ohio ranks 7th in the nation in population, but a mere 47th in public lands available per capita. That's pretty sad and unfortunate. We really need to protect what little we've got left. Thank you.